now I'm going to recreate this mask. Remember, we first masked out the windshield. I'm just going to do that real quick on this more complex layer mask with the brush tool. Okay, let's see how that looks. Great, I can still see clearly in here. That's a good mask. And I'm happy with that. So I'll just delete this first layer. Rename this so it doesn't say copy. And now I want to make sure that this layer mask is perfect, so I'll paint here. Good, now I want to take a look at this, just make sure my layer mask looks how I want it. Good, these edges of white over here don't matter because we're gonna crop our image, especially on the sides here. So later on that won't matter. And that's why it's good to plan out ahead what you're doing so you don't waste time. Even though that's a simple example, it's easy to waste so much time on areas of your image if you don't have a plan. So that's why we always have a plan going in to follow so that we know overall what our image will look like and what we need to do. All right, now if I turn off this mask, you can see that I still have the fields and the car here. So I'm going to create a mask on the Krista driving layer and paint that out. Now in this instance, it would be easier for me to paint white back into my mask than to black out most of it. So what I can do is I can click Control-I to invert that mask, and then with a white paintbrush, paint back in Krista in her car. Good, and now with a smaller sized brush, I'll paint back with black around these edges. Okay, so now if I go to my top layer and turn it on, we will see everything as we want it. No sky, but we see both versions of Krista with this perfectly cut out background. I'm seeing a little bit of blue sky here, and that's from my underlaying mask. If you look right here, this area, I didn't mask that out well enough. So all I have to do is go back, bring my brush size down to get more specific, just paint with black over that. Because we wouldn't want to have to deal with that edge twice. We just do it in the top layer, and then in this bottom layer we just add a mask with a really feathered border. Then we don't have to do the specific stuff more than one time. So our last step right now is going to be to turn on our sky layer and place this how we want it. Because I don't have auto select turned on, I have to have a layer selected in my layers panel in order to move anything. That's why that warning came up. So let's take a look at this. You can see around her hair, the selection looks great. I can move it in and out, and it's such a good transition. A lot of things your eye will forgive if there are little mistakes. Sometimes as you move something, you notice mistakes, but once it's placed, your brain kind of interprets it as that's how it was supposed to be. This area down here is causing some problems. You can see a little halo around her arm and a halo above the field here. Depending on where we place this, we might have to make some adjustments in that layer mask. So let's scale up the sky background. So I'll click Control-T, hold down Shift as I scale it up. If I hold down Alt and Shift as I scale it up, it'll scale from the middle. So we'll go here. Probably scale it a little more actually. You'd be surprised with how much you can get away with when you scale up images. And we'll add a little blur to this cloud. Because it's in the background, it's okay if we add a little blur to it, so if there is any pixelated areas, I'll just smooth it out. If you want to scale an image and you don't want to have to deal with clicking, so if I go Control-T, I can click and drag, or I can adjust my values here. If I want to adjust those values and have it keep its original ratio, I can click Control-T, click that lock between the width and the height, and then when I move one, it'll adjust the other as well. Just scale this in a little bit. Yeah, this just makes the clouds look so much more full. Yeah, I'm in love with this. Now we have these more full clouds behind here. That looks good. So I've made a lot of adjustments to the size of this layer, and it doesn't affect it negatively because it's a smart object. And it's basing all of the transforms on that original smart object. If I had a normal pixel layer and I scaled it down really small and then I wanted to scale it back up, it might look a little pixelated after that because it's basing the changes on how you had saved a layer originally from that first transform. So using smart objects, that's just another good use for them. So I'll accept these changes. I've placed this guy. Don't worry about this. Again, we're going to crop it. So we're really only going to see this area. But this is looking great. Now I want to show you another cool trick that we can use to localize the effects of an adjustment layer to a specific area on our image using layer masks. So what I mean by that is I'm going to go to this Crystal Outside layer. I want to add an adjustment to that. I want to add a curve to make it look a little more dynamic. So if I adjust this curve, bring it down a little bit. Yeah, it just makes the field, if I bring down the shadows especially a little bit, makes the field look a little more interesting. Remember, an adjustment layer will affect every layer beneath it. So right now, if I turn this layer off, you can see how it's affecting the entire image. I don't want that. I want it to affect this area of the grass, not even this area of the grass, definitely not any of the other layers. So what I'll do is I'll apply it to the layer beneath. That looks great, but it's still showing up in this area and on Krista. If I turn it off, you can see what I mean. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this layer mask. Every adjustment layer comes with a layer mask on it already. So all you have to do is go to it and paint. So I will invert this layer mask so it's black, and I'll paint back in with white the areas that I do want to see that adjustment on. So have a brush with 0 hardness, and now I'll go back here, and as I paint back on, you can see the contrast is now being added onto that layer in those areas and nowhere else. So now if I wanted to make this curve even more dramatic, I can go to my curve, bring it way down. Now you can see very clearly where the adjustment is taking place. That's a little too dramatic, so I'll bring it down about right there. Maybe bring it back up over here to add some contrast. Good. And now I'll go in here and fine-tune this a little bit better with the layer mask. So get my brush and brush on white a little bit closer to the edge. Okay, so I think that looks great. We'll keep going, but I just wanted to show you that little trick on how you can use an adjustment layer with a layer mask to only affect certain areas of your image.